Hey, what are you doing? What? I'm busy. This place, it's a frickin' sty. Would you start cleaning, please? Well, what have you been doing? Me? I've been making this video. Wait, this video? Yeah, the video that we're in right now. Okay, tell you what. I challenge you to a duel. You win, I'll clean up. Oh, you want a duel, huh? All right, I'm ready to duel. Come on. Woo! Isn't this fun? When you said duel, I thought I was going to get to hurt you. Hi there, and welcome to the L5R Dojo. My name is Corey. Duels have always been a core part of Legend of the Five Rings. You know, that tabletop role-playing game we've been talking about for 7 episodes. Well, the current version of the game is no exception. When two people have a spat, and they want to duke it out, or even if they're just sparring or having sport of it, they can use the dueling rules. Now, dueling can become really great and engaging scenes where a character can really shine, but there are some drawbacks. Duels usually involve only one PC and an NPC. Well, you could have 2 PCs involved, but someone is almost always going to come away from that scenario bitter. Game Masters. Come here for a second, Game Masters. While it might be fun to have your players spar with each other using these rules, you should really try and steer them away from confronting each other in a serious duel, unless you want your game to break down. The dueling rules try to be broad, so they can encompass many kinds of duels, from Iijitsu fast draw swordsmanship to magical Shugenja battles, to playing a game of dice at the local sake house. But before a duel can even begin, some social rules need to be followed. After all, etiquette is very important in Rokugan.
Challenge.
The official way to start a duel in the current version of L5R is that 2 parties simply agree to dueling within the conventions of their clan, which the book is sparse on details. There are a few examples about crane and crab and unicorn, but other than that, it's up to the players and the GM to suss out the details. The only really hard rule is that if characters cannot agree about the details of the duel, it's up to the Lord of the Land or the Lord of the character with the highest status. By making the rules of establishing a duel vague, it allows the GM to contrive any reason to insert a duel into their game. If a game master doesn't want 2 people to duel, they can simply make up an excuse why they can't. For example, the differences in their status are too vast, or the land of the PCs that they're currently in is observing a holiday in which no duels can be issued. All that said, players and GMs alike love consistency and societal rules that make a certain amount of sense. Now, some of these are my own, developed with my experiences with the game, and others come from previous editions of the game, but I want to make it clear that all of these ideas I'm about to present are strictly off the book, see? Magistrates who make accusations and arrest in their official duty should probably be immune to challenges of duels. It would be rather hard for any sort of law and order to get done when your magistrates are in duels every day, and it would be a quite deadly occupation at that. Anyone challenging a magistrate for doing their duty would seem villainous indeed and forfeit glory as a major loss. A character cannot challenge their direct lord. Your character has sworn oaths to their lord, and by extension, the retainers that are above you in rank. Challenging that lord can and should be dismissed out of hand, and makes the character look petty indeed. Anyone issuing a challenge to their superiors should forfeit honor as a massive breach. The correct way to protest your lord is ritual suicide, but that presents its own problems. It's outside the scope of this video. A character should not be able to challenge another in a higher caste than them. Buke can ignore challenges from G-Samurai, G-Samurai can ignore challenges from Hymen, Hymen can ignore challenges from Burakumin. In fact, those of higher caste can simply have those people arrested or even killed for issuing the challenge. All that said, it takes a certain amount of bravery to try and challenge above one's class. So there is no honor or glory loss for doing so, just the threat of the loss of freedom or life. Like every good rule in society, there are exceptions, and these are based on glory and honor. If a person is exceptionally glorious or exceptionally honorable, it might look bad on any person if they don't accept the challenge, no matter their station. For example, the greatest Hyman Go player challenges a samurai to a game of Go. The samurai would look cowardly for not accepting the game, despite their differences in caste. Likewise, a challenge from a person with a low honor or glory may be dismissed by anyone out of hand because such a disreputable person should not be given the time of day. Of course, it's not only the GM's game, but the PC's as well. So anyone can try and challenge anyone else and shouldn't be yelled down for this behavior. Strange stuff happens in all societies and conventions are broken all the time. A daimyo can certainly spar with their favorite Hyman despite the gossip he might receive about it. The challenge itself can be a fertile ground to explore the culture of Rokugan. But remember, issuing the challenge is only part of it. There are terms to be set, and these include the type of duel, the conditions of the victory, and where that duel takes place. The most common and traditional form of duel is iejitsu, and is the form all duels default to. Iejitsu is the art of the quick draw, where two opponents stare each other down as tension builds, and at the right moment, when they think their opponent has succumbed to the pressure of the tension, the combatants attempt to strike each other, hoping to draw their sword faster than the other. Iejitsu is considered a high art, and there are many who love a more rough and tumble sort of duel. The Warriors Duel is basically a knockdown, drag-out fight between two opponents using whatever weapons or techniques they choose. Sometimes these fights are still regulated to just swords, rather than any weapon you want, and these duels are called Kenjutsu duels, while strictly hand-to-hand fights are called Jujitsu. Shugenja have their own form of dueling, the Wizards Duel. It's called Taryuji, where they cast invocations at each other. Sometimes they also allow physical strikes in the duel, like in Crab and Scorpion lands. There are many other types of duels that the book doesn't explicitly cover. These are wrestling matches, weapon skill challenges, sarane, the rhetoric duel of courtiers, games of dice or cards, even foot races. These can all be covered in one-roll duels, which I'll talk about later in this video. But if you want a more comprehensive rule set for wrestling or games of chance, I've created a dynamic experience using my own rules, and you can find that in the link in the description. Next is the winning condition. The most extreme of this is the duel to the death. This is reserved for physical fights, like an Iejitsu or Warriors duel. Typically, duels to the death must be approved by each of the participants' lord, but these types of duels can easily happen on the battlefield or in the heat of the moment. Battlefield duels to the death can be expected due to the nature of war, but a heat of the moment duel to the death? Well, that can lead to a blood feud. Duels to incapacitation. Duels to incapacitation means the duel proceeds until one of the characters' fatigue exceeds their endurance, giving them the incapacitated condition. I hate that word, incapacitated. Warrior duels and Taryuji are usually fought to this condition. Iejitsu duels can also be fought to first strike or first blood. First strike means the first character to inflict any critical hit on their opponent wins. First blood is when the critical strike exceeds 5 or more, which results in a debilitating gash. This covers the winning conditions as stated in the book, but there are others, such as ring outs for wrestling matches, or winning a hand of cards, or even having the largest cut for a test of stone. Duels can also be determined by an impartial judge or set of judges on criteria. They can even be set by the roar of a crowd. When determining who won by this standard, there is this chart for gaining points. In fact, this chart should always be used in any duel to assess how much glory is awarded to either player for participating in the duel. The winner of a duel may also gain additional reward if the duel was predicated on some predefined goal. For example, a person dueling for their honor may gain exoneration and even apology by the defeated. A competition may have a prize or status gain, or both. A gambling match will have a monetary reward. The last thing that needs to be settled is time location, and who exactly will participate. There can be many reasons for duels not to take place for long periods of time. For example, a pregnant woman may wish to wait until she is no longer carrying a child before they may duel. A character may be on a special quest, or someone else may hold their life and it needs to be released before they can duel. It is recommended that PC duels happen quickly to resolve the drama, but two NPCs that are waiting on a duel yet see each other often can be the impetus for a good plot. Many would want a spiritual cleansing before a duel to the death, which might realistically take a week, but I recommend not being realistic here, as spiritual cleansing could take a character out of play. Err on the side of storytelling always. Locations are probably always the easiest thing to decide. Be creative with it, be epic, and create interesting stages for a duel. Bridges at sunset, the Master's Dojo, the Championship Ring, the Daimyo's Yacht. The possibilities are endless. Duels can draw a large crowd, but sometimes a private duel on a beach can be just as exciting. Now I'd like to talk about participants, namely the idea of champions, or people who take the place of the person dueling in their name. There are no hard and fast rules for champions, but I'd like to tell you how I like to rule it in my game. Lords can have any of their subjects stand in for them during a duel. Many times this is how they're able to skirt the ramifications of a duel. If an underling is wounded or killed protecting their lord, so be it, they did their duty. The second type of champion is a person who stands in for an unskilled opponent. For example, if a courtier or shugenja is challenged to a sword fight, it's reasonable that a yojimbo, a bodyguard, stands in for them. A warrior would look weak if they call in a champion for a physical duel, just as a shugenja would look weak for calling in a champion on a taryuji. Any character doing so should have a major loss of glory, and maybe browbeat into giving up the champion.
One-roll duels.
A typical duel has a tension that rises every round until a final strike is delivered. This is fine and well for combatants in a physical altercation, but for everything else, there's the optional one-roll duels. One-roll duels are just that. Two players involved take their dice pool for the relevant ring and skill, take into account the terrain, advantages, disadvantages, anything they can leverage to their advantage, and then make a single attack roll at TN1 adjusted for wound, stance, or anything else. The player that makes the roll with the most bonus successes wins the duel, or has the least shortfall if neither of them make their TN. If weapons are involved, the winning character inflicts a critical hit with double the deadliness, plus bonus successes to their opponent. Their opponent defends as normal. If characters are tied for bonus successes, then it's a karmic strike, both hitting each other and inflicting the critical strike just as I described. After the strike is resisted, the character with the least grievous wound wins. If the wounds are the same, then the duel is a draw. Why would a GM want to use these rules? Well, first is if the type of duel doesn't fit Iijitsu, Warrior's Duel, or the Shugenja Duel, then the GM can quickly default to a one-roll duel. For example, if the duel is a wrestling match and the GM doesn't have my handy guide to alternative duels, then they may just want to use a one-roll duel instead. Duels can also take up a good deal of time, and since only one player is usually involved, it can lead to a game where the other players might get bored while the dueler has the spotlight. Or if there's a time crunch and a one-roll duel can speed the game along so everyone can get as much roleplay in as they can, or maybe a GM just doesn't like the dynamic dueling rules. Look, I don't know your life, you do you!
Focus.
Now that all that's out of the way, let's talk about what I call the dynamic duel. This is the normal way duels are presented in the game. Each player will use their focus value and then roll a TN1 meditation roll. Anyone succeeding in that roll will add 1 to their focus plus 1 for every bonus success, and this number will become their initiative. This can be further modified by the stare down. At the beginning of each turn, the stare down occurs. Stare downs are where the tension of the duel rises. This is described in the book as a warrior's sense becoming elevated. I like to say that a warrior begins to run scenarios in their minds on how they intend to attack or defend in order to win the battle, second-guessing themselves, and their anxiety over their win or loss builds. However you like to describe a stare down, the end result is the same: strife. Each character in the duel gains an amount of strife equal to the rounds they are in. In the first round of the duel, each character gains 1 strife, but in the second round of the duel, they will gain 2 more strife, and so on and so on. After the strife gain, if each character is not compromised, they may now secretly bid additional strife. They reveal that number at the same time and gain that amount of strife, but they also add that number to their initiative until the end of the round. Either player may bid 0, of course. Initiative scores then revert to their original value at the end of the round. Once initiative totals are finalized for that round, the player with the highest initiative goes first. On their turn, they may choose a stance, move, and take an action. I covered stances in a previous video, but Mr. Wallscroll can give you a quick review. Remember, narrate your stance. A character on fire stance may grind their teeth or grip their weapon with white knuckles, while a character on earth stance may be low to the ground or holding their weapon defensively. Go forth and be epic. Movement in a duel may not matter that much. The book states that mechanically all duels start at range 2, but then explains that on their turn a character can move pretty much wherever they wish as long as the game master allows it. Much of the time, movement won't matter, but sometimes it will. For example, when I ran Sin of Regret, one of my players in a duel described how he moved to the edge of the crowd, setting up for a strike when their opponent closed distance.
And I move. I can still move.
You can move. You can move wherever you want, actually. There's no, like, range
and I
stance or
move.
anything.
I move far enough away from her to force her to have to come to me.
Okay. When you backed away from her towards the edge of, like, the dueling area, I assume, right? You're no longer in the center, you're in the edge.
Yeah.
Which characters do you think you have retreated next to?
So I imagine that I'm still standing where I started and just backed up straight. So whoever was on my side, being maybe everybody in the group and maybe Mia Shinako.
But when the player struck, his opponent had a technique that allowed her to deflect the blow into another character within range. Since the player described he moved close to the crowd, he accidentally killed a very important bystander when that blow was deflected, causing the duel to immediately halt.
All right. I have a technique, and you are going to be very upset.
Then
School of the Wolf. Once per round, when an attack action targeting the Ronin succeeds, the Ronin may suffer 3 strife and change the target to another character.
19, 20, 21.
21.
Deadliness 21.
21. This might be instant death for the character.
Oh no.
Ayumi beheads Mia Shinako.
Oh. Ooh.
Yeah, this is the situation where the referee should go, no! Disqualified!
Now let's talk about some duel actions. Put up the list. These are the things each character can do in a round. Remember, a character can take only 1 action per round unless on water stance. First up, calming breath. I've covered this action in other videos, so I won't spend any more time on it other to say that this is the primary way to recover in a duel. Center is a way to store your good dice for use later. As the character begins to outthink their opponent, they may create conditions for their next move. Think of it as setting up your opponent, like how you can think many moves ahead in chess. This action can only be used on void stance, so make sure your character is on it. Choose a skill and roll a number of skill dice equal to your ranks in that skill. Do not activate any signs on those dice. Exploding dice do not explode. Strife dice do not add strife. At least, they don't do that yet. After those dice are rolled, the player can take any number of them and then store them in reserve, never changing their top face. For example, you can keep an explosive success die in reserve as if it was rolled. Then, the next time you roll that skill, you can replace any number of dice with that reserve die. This happens after you have already rolled the skill check in question, so you can pick up a bum die and then replace it with your better reserve dice. You can even replace ring dice with skill dice that were in reserve. A note, you cannot keep more dice in reserve than your skill rank. Why does this need clarification if you're just rolling skill dice? Well, void points. You can still spend a void to roll an extra ring die with your center action. If the ring die is kept in reserve, it can replace a skill die or a ring die the next time that skill is rolled. And yes, it must be the next time the skill is rolled. These reserve dice cannot be held indefinitely for some future roll. Also, and this is not in the book, but it makes sense to me, it can't be held in reserve after the duel is ended. Reserve dice are lost when the scene ends. Predict helps you to strife your opponent out. You literally secretly predict the stance your opponent will be on when their turn starts. If you choose correctly, your opponent gains 4 strife and must choose a different stance. While there is only a 1 in 5 chance of picking the correct stance, if you can figure it out, you'll be that much closer to your finishing blow. So there's a huge benefit to it. You must announce that you are predicting, so your opponent does know that you are trying to guess their next stance. But since the prediction itself is secret, it can be a great way to add some drama to a duel. Prepare item is another one already discussed in previous videos. Remember, drawing a weapon is considered an action. So unless it's an Iijitsu strike, which is drawing and striking in a single motion, you can only do the draw. You can always perform a unique action as long as it's within the rules of the duel. If it's not, you may suffer honor or glory losses or even forfeit the duel. So be aware, talk it over with the game master, and be fair. Strike is an action I devoted an entire video to. But there's something very important to talk about with this action, namely that you can't always use it without breaking the rules. For example, in some instances of Tarugi, it's forbidden to strike. And you certainly cannot, or rather shouldn't, take a strike during a game of chance or during a sadane. But most importantly, you cannot use the strike action in a Iijitsu duel until the finishing blow. Look, I know what it says in the book. Each warrior must begin with their blaze sheath, drawing them no earlier than their first turn. This implies you can draw your weapon first turn and then strike. But this is not within the spirit of an Iijitsu duel, in my opinion. Swords must stay in their sheaths until a finishing blow is dealt. After that blow, if the victory condition is not achieved, it is then transformed into a warrior's duel, and strike actions can be used whenever you like. Finishing blows are special attack actions that I'll go into more detail soon enough, but it can be the primary way to bring a duel to a close. Iijitsu duels are supposed to be one strike, one win duels. I strongly believe that strikes cannot be used during the Iijitsu period of a duel. If you support the rules as written, or if you support my own interpretation of Iijitsu duels, please sound off in the comments. I want to hear about you. I want to hear your opinion on the Iijitsu duel. Now, let's talk about those finishing blows.
Strike.
I love the idea of a finishing blow. Let me break it down for you. When a character gains enough strife to become compromised or unmasked for any reason, they lose composure. They're fighting edge, and they open themselves up to a finishing blow. Then, their opponent can interrupt anything they're doing and make an attack action against them. This can interrupt an action, interrupt the stare down, or if a character gains strife while performing a finishing blow, can interrupt another finishing blow. A finishing blow is not an attack action itself, but instead allows you to choose any of the attack actions you have, including any attack techniques or even the strike action. This allows you to use any of the opportunities associated with that attack action, but damage is done differently. If the attack action is successful, the attack does no damage. Instead, a critical hit is inflicted with double the amount of deadliness of the weapon or action, plus the number of bonus successes. For example, if this is an Iijitsu duel and the character succeeded in their finishing blow with 2 bonus successes, then they would take the one-handed deadliness of their weapon at 5, double it to 10, and then add 2 bonus successes for a total of 12 deadliness. This can be further modified by school techniques, kata, invocations, whatever the character has. The opponent may defend as normal, making a fitness check to absorb the blow, or even use a shattering parry if they have a readied weapon in their hand. A finishing blow is usually devastating and more often than not signals the end of the duel. But sometimes, even after the finishing blow, the conditions of the duel are not met. In this case, the duel continues as normal. Triggering a finishing blow does not count as unmasking. So, if that was not the cause of the finishing blow, then a character still has all of their accumulated strife. A finishing blow can only be triggered once per character per duel. So, if you were already the target of a finishing blow, you cannot be again for the rest of the duel. And that's that. That's all I know about dueling in Legend of the Five Rings. I hope this clears up a bunch of questions you have about the rules, and if it did, give this video a thumbs up. I'd like to know how you run duels and if you do them differently. Next video, we'll be talking about skirmishes. These are your standard combatants with multiple opponents, so stay subscribed for that. I'd like to thank my patrons on Patreon for their continued support. Without them, this channel might receive its finishing blow. Until next time, never stop gaining experience.